Right, so hello and welcome back to Books and Things, and welcome to another video. And today I have some more amazing historical fiction from the Walter Scott Prize Longlist to tell you about. So today I'm going to be reviewing two really fantastic historical novels, both of which were on the long list for the Walter Scott Prize for Historical Fiction. So the two books I'm going to be reviewing today are A Sign of Her Own by Sarah Marsh, which was on the long list but sadly didn't make the shortlist. And then I'm also going to be reviewing The Safekeep by Yael van der Woden, which did make the shortlist and is also fantastic. I loved both of these books a lot. The winner of the Walter Scott Prize is also due to be announced today when I'm filming this. It hasn't been announced yet. So I thought what I would do is review the two books I've read from the Walter Scott Prize long list recently, then talk through like my overall thoughts on the shortlist. I've now read the whole shortlist, and what my personal shortlist would have been from the long list. I've read 9 out of the 12 books on the long list, and I think those are probably all the ones I'm going to get to, certainly before the winner is announced today, but probably this year. I would still really like to read The First Friend by Malcolm Knox, but I just haven't got round to it yet. So I don't think I'm gonna hurry to it now that the winner will be announced any moment. So I thought, yeah, I would talk through my thoughts on the shortlist, my own personal shortlist, give some possible predictions for the winner, and then I will add a little clip onto the end of this video talking about the actual winner when the winner is announced. But in the meantime, yes, let me talk through these two books. I think I'm going to start with A Sign of Her Own because I've just finished reading this, and then I will go on to The Safekeep. Also, I feel like more people have spoken about The Safekeep than A Sign of Her Own, so I want to put this one up first. I also thought this was great, and I think it should have been on the shortlist, but hey. So, A Sign of Her Own is a really fascinating novel set in the 19th century, partly in London, partly in Boston. This book focuses on a young deaf woman called Ellen Lark, and we are following her in kind of two timelines. So we have the sort of present moments of her life, and then we also go back in other chapters to her childhood and her adolescence, her education, and the lessons she had as a sort of older teenager, sort of 16, 17 years old, with Alexander Graham Bell, obviously a real historical figure and famous for the invention of the telephone. But you might not know, I didn't know, that Alexander Graham Bell was also involved in teaching deaf children and adults, and specifically in promoting a system called visible speech. And the idea behind visible speech was to use symbols on the page to represent mouth movements in order to teach deaf children to speak more like hearing people. So I'll show you, the book has some examples of visible speech. And we follow Ellen's education, how she starts having lessons with Alexander Graham Bell, and how she is at first quite charmed by him, how they have a bit of a friendship as well as a teacher-pupil dynamic, and how she endeavours to learn his system, but also how she comes to question it. Alexander Graham Bell, you know, in real historical fact, very firmly believed that visible speech and lip reading was the best method of communication for deaf people, and was very dismissive of sign language. And quite a lot of this book is about Ellen kind of discovering more about herself, and coming to question some of the things she has been told. And throughout the book, she meets various other people from within the deaf community who give her different views on, or different ways of looking at the world, and different ways of looking at her own position within the world. And that's the kind of thematic heart of the book, I suppose. But as well as following Ellen's coming of age story in many ways, we're also following her on the brink of marrying someone when Mr. Alexander Graham Bell turns up in her life again. There is a lot of controversy about him at that moment because there has been a dispute about whether he is the real inventor of the telephone. Everything kind of goes on from there. I just thought A Sign of Her Own was fantastic. I think as a coming of age story, it is wonderful. The characterization is so rich. Ellen's characterization, but also the characterization of those around her. I loved the character of Frank. I thought he was so well drawn. And I thought Alexander Graham Bell was really well drawn as well. I'm really complexly drawn because it's not a flattering portrait of him. And there are many things about him that are quite dislikable, and you see how his prejudices and misunderstandings affect the way he acts. But I also think he comes across as very human, and he's a very, very fully fledged character within the novel. Historically, this book is really interesting. I didn't know anything about visible speech, and I didn't know anything about the backlash against sign language in the second half of the 19th century. And that is quite upsetting to read about at some points, but is also really, really fascinating and really interestingly explored. The way this book looks at language and communication is fascinating, and especially the emphasis on communication over the particular method of communication. You know, so much of this book is about how communication and language is what matters, not which language or not which method of communication. And I thought that was done really, really well. The way this book used language and communication thematically was fantastic. And it was interesting, I kept thinking as I was reading this about another book on the long list, Clear by Karis Davis, which is a wonderful, wonderful book that is also in many ways about language and communication. And it was really interesting to think about those two books alongside each other and kind of how they would be quite good as a pair, looking at language and communication in quite different ways. It's always quite fun to look for like thematic links between books on a long list. If you're someone who liked Clear and who loves books that explore language and communication, then I think you'll find A Sign of Her Own really interesting too. I also thought it was wonderfully written. Like, the writing is just very, very smooth, really readable, very powerful and poignant, but like never getting in the way of what the book is trying to say and like the characters and the story. I think the writing just like served the book perfectly. And yeah, overall, I just loved this a lot. I thought it was fantastic. The sort of movement between the past and the present, and the propulsion of the plot and the climax was just so great. And I loved Ellen so much as a character. And like I said, I think in many ways it is a coming of age story, and I think it's such a fantastic one. But I also think you'll learn a lot of fascinating things from it. And I just really, really loved this one a lot. So I would really, really recommend A Sign of Her Own. I thought it was fantastic. And another book I thought was absolutely fantastic was The Safekeep by Yael van der Woden. I don't have a physical copy to hold up of this because I listened to the audiobook, which I got out from the library, and the audiobook was really great. I would definitely recommend the audiobook. It was interesting. I went into A Sign of Her Own really expecting to like it, but I didn't go into The Safekeep really expecting to like it. I think because it was on the Booker Prize long list, I therefore had in my head it was going to be really literary and that it was going to be a bit too pretentious and highfalutin for me. But actually, I thought it was fantastic, and it was really approachable and really accessible. And, you know, I listened to the audiobook, which does sometimes make a more literary book more accessible, but I didn't find The Safekeep too literary at all. I thought it was just a great, really tense, really thematically fascinating novel with fantastic characterization. So what is The Safekeep about? It is set in the early 1960s in the Netherlands. We are following a woman called Isabel. She lives in her family home, a place that she has lived in since her childhood, and she used to live there with her mother and her two brothers, but her mother has passed away. Her two brothers have left home. She now lives there all on her own. She doesn't have very many friends. She doesn't see many people, and she lives quite a lonely, solitary life. The only thing she values is her house and sort of her relationship with her brother Henrik. They have a good friendship and get on very well, but there is always a sort of like distance between them because Isabel is not hugely comfortable with the fact that Henrik is gay, and that he is in a long-term relationship with his partner Sebastian, who he lives with. And it's clear that Isabel is to some degree uncomfortable with her brother's like deviation from societal norms, I suppose, at this point in time. At the beginning of the book, their elder brother Louis asks Isabel if his new girlfriend, Eva, can come and stay with Isabel while he's away out of the country with work. Isabel definitely doesn't want this to happen because she really hates Eva. But the house Isabel lives in technically belongs to her brother Louis, so she feels that she has no choice. And Eva comes to stay with her for the summer. And everything kind of spirals from there. And it's about these two women, Isabel and Eva, in this house over this summer, and all of the tension between them. And it's a hugely tense book. Like, the tension is just absolutely fantastically drawn. I have rarely read a book that is that sizzling with tension even when not much stuff is happening. One other thing the Safekeep looks at in a really interesting way is the long legacy of the Second World War and sort of how the shadow of the war still hangs over Dutch society and how there are so many scars left and how there are so many things that have not been resolved. The characterization is great, really, really superbly drawn. Isabel is such a dislikable character in so many ways. Like, there are so many moments where I just, like, really hated her. But I think she's drawn in such a way that you really understand why she is as she is. And her character growth and her character arc is very, very effective. And also the moments where she doesn't like fulfill her character growth sufficiently. Like, it all just is very, very believable, and works very, very well. And I thought the characterization of the other characters was really fantastically drawn. There's something in the Safekeep that emerges later on in the novel that is not exactly a twist, but I worked it out really early on, and I wasn't sure whether or not I was meant to. And I also feel like I've watched like a few people talk about it in passing in wrap-ups. I've been avoiding like individual reviews, but I do wonder if I had maybe gleaned something, I'm not sure. But even like having a pretty good sense of where the story was going, I still found it so tense, and so powerful. And I thought it was just superbly done. The one thing I still don't know how I feel about is the very ending, because I was kind of like expecting the audiobook to end like 15 minutes before it did, or something like that. And there was a point where I felt like it could have ended and had quite a different ending tonally. And I don't know what I think of the actual ending. I feel like I can't really say more than that without spoilers, but I don't know if I fully believed the final ending for the characters. I don't know if I fully believe that they would behave in the way they do in the very, very, very end of the book. But I still thought it was fantastic. And just, yeah, a really thematically interesting idea, executed superbly. What a great book. So I've now read all 6 books from the shortlist and 9 out of the 12 books from the long list. And yeah, it's always very interesting to see what books from a long list make it onto the shortlist, especially because the 3 books I've read from the long list that didn't make it onto the shortlist, I absolutely loved all of them, and I'm quite sad that they're not on the shortlist. I thought all 3 of them were fantastic. So the 3 books I've read from the shortlist that didn't make it onto the long list are Clear by Karis Davis, A Sign of Her Own by Sarah Marsh, and Mother Naked by Glenn James Brown. All 3 of which I thought were just fantastic. And, you know, I have read the whole shortlist, but I've read the books that excited me most from the long list. So the books that I've read from the long list that didn't make the shortlist were also some of the books I personally was the most excited about and I personally thought would appeal to my personal taste the best. So maybe that's also why I have enjoyed so much the books from the long list that I've read that didn't make the shortlist, if that makes sense. Whereas some of the books from the shortlist I kind of knew would be less for me, but I picked them up anyway. I do think that if I were making my own personal shortlist, I would include Clear, Mother Naked, and A Sign of Her Own, along with Glorious Exploits by Ferdinand Lennon and The Safekeep by Yael van der Rooten. Those 5 books I thought were completely incredible. And then in terms of the final place on my 6-book shortlist, I would probably give it to The Mare by Angered Hampshire. I did also really love The Land in Winter by Andrew Miller, but I just feel like The Mare is a really like very, very hard-hitting but very important, thematically vital book about how ordinary people who might never do evil things in certain circumstances might do horrendously evil things in particular social and political contexts. And I think how The Mare looked at like dehumanization feels very important in a 21st century that is feeling at times increasingly polarized. So I think that would be my personal shortlist: Glorious Exploits, The Safekeep, The Mare, Clear, A Sign of Her Own, and Mother Naked. My favourite from my personal shortlist is Glorious Exploits. That is still my favourite. My second favourite from my personal shortlist is maybe Mother Naked by Glenn James Brown, because I did just think that was very, very fun and very clever. However, 3 of those books are not on the actual shortlist. In terms of the actual shortlist, my favourite is Glorious Exploits. My second favourite is the Safekeep. Then my third favourite would be The Mare. Then The Land in Winter, then The Book of Days, then The Heart in Winter. Like, if I were ranking the shortlist, that would be my ranking. So my favourite to win is Glorious Exploits. I would absolutely love it if Glorious Exploits won. I don't know if I think it will, though I think it should. I don't know what I think will win. I don't think The Book of Days will win, because I think it is a quieter, more ponderous novel, and I think it's very well done. I think it works very, very effectively, but I don't think it's necessarily packs the punch of some of the others. I also don't think The Heart in Winter is going to win, but maybe that's because it isn't to my personal taste. I don't know. I feel like the Safekeep is probably going to win. That's my prediction. And I'd be very happy to see it win, because I do think it's great. While I say Glorious Exploits is my favourite to win, and it is my favourite to win because I loved it the most and I think it is incredible and just genuinely one of the best novels I've ever read, and like, I can't believe that was a debut. What a absolute masterpiece. However, it would also be quite nice to see The Mare win. The Mare was from an independent publisher, and like, I don't think that many people have read it, and I feel like the Safekeep doesn't need the boost, right? And Glorious Exploits kind of doesn't need the boost. But the boost that The Mare would get from this would be important to what is an important book that asks a lot of very complicated, very challenging questions that are good to ask. So I would kind of like to see The Mare win the prize. I do also think The Land in Winter is great. I haven't mentioned that one. Like I said, probably wouldn't quite make my personal shortlist, but I did think it was fantastic, and Andrew Miller is a great writer. But I suppose Glorious Exploits is my favourite to win. The Safekeep is what I kind of think will win, but I kind of think The Mare should win. We'll see. I guess I will film another clip for this video in however many hours when the winner is announced. I think the Women's Prize winner is also announced today, so it is theoretically possible that the Safekeep could win both the Women's Prize and the Walter Scott Prize, like, within 24 hours. I just really hope it's Glorious Exploits. But I also kind of hope it's The Mare. This has been quite enough ramble, so I will pause for now, and I will return at some point soon to let you know who the winner is and what my thoughts are. Hello again. A bit later on in the day, and the winner of the Walter Scott Prize has been announced, and it is not what I was expecting. It is The Land in Winter by Andrew Miller, which I did love and I thought was great, but I wasn't expecting to win, and wouldn't be my favourite to win, as I have already said in this video. It wasn't my favourite to win, but I do think it was great. I did really enjoy it. I thought it was really fascinating and very well crafted, and I really like Andrew Miller as a writer, though I didn't love this one quite as much as And Now I Should Be Entirely Free. So what the Walter Scott Prize have said about the winner is, a true master craftsman, Andrew Miller has painted big themes on a subtle canvas of tiny detail. With rare and delicate skill, The Land in Winter opens up the lives of Bill and Rita, Eric and Irene, in ways that will sing differently to each reader and sing differently again on each rereading. With prose as softly dazzling as the snow of the 1962 to 63 winter in which the novel is set, Andrew Miller takes his richly deserved place amongst the Walter Scott Prize pantheon of great contemporary writers. And I do agree with all of that. Like, I do think it's a fantastic book, and I think what they said about, like, painting big themes on a subtle canvas of tiny detail is a nice way of exploring what Andrew Miller does in The Land in Winter. It's one of those books that has a lot of big themes explored through everyday life and small moments, which I really loved. So yeah, I am sad that Glorious Exploits didn't win, and I am slightly sad that The Mare didn't win. I don't feel that sad that the Safekeep didn't win, even though I loved it, because I feel like the Safekeep has had a lot of prize recognition. I wonder if the Safekeep will win the Women's Prize. I think Glorious Exploits should have won, but hey, it's okay. I don't think my favourite to win the Walter Scott Prize usually wins. I think it was one year. The year News of the Dead by James Robertson won. That was the year it was my favourite to win, but this year it wasn't. But that's okay. I'm still very glad Glorious Exploits made the shortlist, and I have loved a lot of books from the Longlist this year. I've read so many fantastic books, and I think especially, like, I probably would have read Glorious Exploits anyway because I'd heard so much about it, but there were a few books on the Longlist, I think especially The Mare and Mother Naked, which I don't think I'd have read if they hadn't been on the Longlist. And even The Safekeep, to be honest, even though it was quite big and I have heard a lot about it, I feel like I just was thinking it was to be too literary for me, and I was wrong. I'm very glad that I have read along with the Walter Scott Prize yet again this year. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what will make next year's Longlist. Did I have anything else to say? Oh yes, I Obviously put up a lot of videos for my like 10 years of books and things, which was great fun, but was quite a lot of content to make and edit, etc. And I'm looking forward to Jane Austen July and have some video plans for that, which is a long way of me saying there may be fewer videos for the next like 2 weeks until Jane Austen July. There are a few videos I still want to make in June, so maybe, having said this, that won't happen and there will still be 2 videos a week. But it might be that there aren't 2 videos a week, and that I come back in full force in July. We will see. Anyway, let me know what you think of the Walter Scott Prize winner, if you've read any from the shortlist or the long list, and what was your favourite to win. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll be back very soon with another bookish video.